Thanks for tuning in live to Proline TV, the R Lads Football Network, as we talk AFC South and our 32nd of 32 team previews with the Cincinnati Bengals. John Sheeran, A to Z Sports, joining us. John, congratulations for you don't get anything out of it, but you're the 32nd team preview we've done over the past couple of months. So
saving the best for last. AFC North, though, by the way.
Oh, what did I say? South?
Yeah.
All right. I just did the South. So yeah, thanks for correcting me. I don't want to sound like an idiot this early in the broadcast. So yeah, the Cincinnati Bengals, man. This season, this off season, especially the last few weeks with everything going on with Hendrickson, handicappers, most of the handicappers that I've listened to do not think it's going to go well for Cincinnati. They think that most of what you saw last year with the defense, nothing's changed. They're gonna score 40 and they're gonna give up 40, and that's going to be the Bengals. I don't agree. I actually believe that I actually have the Bengals. Do I have I have the Bengals at least in the championship game this year.
Wow.
So I actually think it's. I have a little bit more faith in the defense. And that's because when we talked, I know you talked about how the secondary, some of those young players were starting to develop until the injuries occurred. So if they're healthy, I think that's going to be a plus, obviously. I like the draft, especially with Knight, but that's what you're here for, to fill me in and maybe wake me up to my delusion. But you tell me, let's start there on defense. Did the Bengals have the type of defense anywhere close to what they had when they made their Super Bowl run in order to make another run to the Super Bowl?
On paper, I wouldn't say so, because that defense in 2021 was filled with a lot of hungry vets that were looking for second chances, still kind of in the prime of their careers. It was kind of a nice collection of guys just all coming together at the right time, with the defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, who had a lot of trust in those guys to run his system. It's a completely different looking unit now, because now it's comprised mainly of a lot of younger guys that have just never really played significant roles before, with obviously some veterans sprinkled in here and there, like TJ Slaton. He's coming into his second contract. Logan Wilson is now a new captain of the defense at 29 years old at linebacker. BJ Hill obviously still there, and obviously Trey Hendrickson, another first-time captain. But everywhere else, it's just a lot of young players who were drafted by this team. Even if they're not starting on the initial starting depth chart, they're still going to have significant roles. They're going to play a lot more than they did when Lou Anarumo was under command, and obviously he had a lot more trust in the more experienced guys to run his scheme and his system. And obviously now without Golden now leading the charge, it's a different looking defense. I think the word simpler has been used a lot, and I would agree with that in terms of just making sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of what they're going to do to combat opposing offenses. I don't think it's going to be a simple defense to attack necessarily, but I think right now it's just a lot of it just remains to be seen. I think what we saw in the preseason wasn't very promising, and Al Golden has kind of taken the brunt of the blame of that by saying that they basically ran like 10%, if that, of what they were running in training camp. And to be honest, Greg, it didn't seem like a really productive use of their time to have the starters out there without doing or executing anything that they were doing in training camp, and obviously looking like a pretty battered and below average unit at best. So right now, I think expectations are rightfully low, but I think what people are missing about this defense is the fact that there are a lot of changes in terms of guys from last year's team no longer here, guys who were just unfortunately at that point in their careers kind of dead weight, and they were being replaced by younger guys who are hungry and ready to prove themselves. And I think that's a definite benefit. But obviously, with a lot of these guys having never really played expanded significant roles, there's a lot to be seen. So right now, it's just basically they got to go out there and prove it.
Yeah, and no question, that's also where coaching comes in, and sometimes whether or not you want to say Anarumo or is better than Golden or vice versa, sometimes just a new voice is needed, and maybe that will be what the Bengals will be able to also bank on, and that'll be effective. But one thing's for sure, they've got to stay healthy, because that was definitely part of their downfall the last couple of seasons. So who do you think out of all those young players, who are you the most confident with that can really take another step?
I think at the top of the page for when we're looking at YouTube right now, Joseph Asai, now he's starting defensive end in a contract year. He signed a 1-year deal in the offseason. He's still technically kind of on the younger side. I think he's 25, entering his 5th season, but he's never really had an expanded role outside of maybe like the 3rd defensive end in their rotation. But I think he's far and away clearly their 2nd best defensive end on this team. He's more proven than Miles Murphy, and I think he's just a better overall player right now compared to Shamar Stewart. So I'm excited to see him in his starter's role. I'm really excited. I mean, you're a Michigan guy. Like, Dax Hill was man the slot cornerback position, the star position for Michigan at his peak in his college days, and it's what made him a first-round pick. He's finally at that position now. I don't know if he's 100% healthy coming off of that torn ACL. I think there's going to be a little bit more time before he really gets to that level, but he's definitely healthy enough to play and start. And when he is healthy, he's arguably their best athlete in the secondary and is in his pure natural position. So I'm really excited to see him kind of flourish in that role. I think Cam Taylor-Britt is a better fit in Al Golden's man-centric scheme compared to the defense that Lou Anarumo ran. I'm really interested to see if Demetrius Knight, who was really promising in training camp, if he's a better version of himself than what we saw in the preseason when he clearly looked a little bit lost and maybe not exactly ready to start, but how he and Barrett Carter kind of evolve in their roles. Maybe Barrett Carter gets some more chances as the season goes on. I think there's a lot of promise with those guys. So yeah, there's a lot of younger players on this team, maybe not necessarily in their first couple of years, but maybe in years 3, 4, and 5 that, again, just haven't really gotten that chance to really prove themselves in expanded roles. So those are the guys I'm definitely watching for.
And edge rushing and just getting pressure is going to be so important. So between Murphy, you mentioned Asai, and Stewart, Asai is definitely the one that, as you mentioned, the first name, that probably has the best chance of taking the next step pressure-wise. What about the 2 younger guys, Stewart and Murphy? Of course, Stewart a little bit late getting in there, but have you seen anything promising out of Murphy or Stewart so far?
I think I was a little bit underwhelmed with Murphy in training camp. He had some flashes, but unfortunately, a theme for him is that around this time of year, he's been kind of injured. He's been a little bit banged up. He had a knee injury last year that really derailed the beginning of his season, and that was almost the case this year. He suffered a knee injury kind of late in training camp, but he should be ready to go for week 1. But I think right now he's probably the 4th defensive end on this depth chart, and for a first-round pick entering his 3rd year, it's not exactly where you want to be. As far as with Stewart, who is just a more explosive athlete, like Murphy, I think has a better idea of what he's doing as a pass rusher, but I think with Stewart, he's just a ball of kinetic energy, and he just explodes into the backfield. He can explode into those in those interior gaps on stunts, and I think that's allowing him to have maybe more of an expansive role than we would have expected for someone who was kind of late integrating himself within this defense since he signed his contract right at the beginning of training camp. I think the coaches just want him out there because it gives them an element that they don't really have elsewhere on this defensive line, someone who can cause chaos and allow other guys to be freed up, because you have to take account of a guy who's just a wrecking ball into the offensive line. Obviously, you need to be able to use your hands. You need to know what you're doing, or else, NFL offensive linemen are going to handle you with ease. But that speed, that size, and explosion is definitely valuable for Stewart. It's what's going to get him on the field early.
What do you think is like when a team game plans for the Bengals? What do you think, besides, of course, hey, how do we double, triple team Hendrickson? Besides that, what are they trying to do? And what are you the most nervous about when the Bengals are out there on offense and fans are just hoping that they don't see what they've seen the last couple of years? What is it they're most nervous about?
I think right now there's a lot of pressure on TJ Sladen, the starting nose tackle. He was brought in basically to hold the point of attack, take on double teams, free up linebackers, stop the run up the middle, because that was such a huge problem for them last year, considering that they didn't really have anyone inside that could do that. They didn't have a true nose tackle on the team last year, and that caused a lot of problems. And unfortunately, it didn't make Logan Wilson look like the best version of himself behind all those guys, right? So Sladen has a lot of pressure to just basically hold the point of attack, a lot like DJ Reader did back in his days when he was with Cincinnati from 2021 to 2023, and just make everyone's jobs easier and by holding the multiple blockers and bringing up those gaps, because that was such a huge problem for them last year. But again, that wasn't necessarily the case in the preseason. I don't think Sladen looked particularly good in preseason action that we saw him in those first 2 games. So there's a lot to be seen with that. Like, Chris Jenkins will be tasked with that as well. He's, I think, expected to take that next step as an overall player, not only as a run defender, but a pass rusher as well. There's just a lot of unproven untapped potential with these defensive tackles. And now Slayton is back with his former defensive line coach, Jerry Montgomery. The two worked together with the Green Bay Packers. That was when Slayton, I think Montgomery's last year in Green Bay was Slayton's best year in terms of his production, in terms of his run stop rate. So that's the expectation for him this year. But again, it's a lot of, I see better than I hear. And so far I haven't seen enough to be like, yeah, this is going to be a strength of the team. Right now it's still weakness.
Okay. Who are you most confident with? DJ Turner, his development, or Jordan Battles?
It's a good question. I think Battle had a really strong training camp. I know he was kind of picked on against the Commanders and not tackling Jaden Daniels as he was going over to the goal line, but I think he has kind of a renewed look on his career now that he's the full-fledged starter at strong safety. That was kind of what should have been the expectation last year, and then Von Bell was brought back into the picture, and then Battle kind of sat on the bench for the first half of the season until they realized that he was definitely the better option compared to Von Bell, and then he played well at the end of his second season. So I think expectations are high for Battle to just be a solid, capable starting safety, which the Bengals haven't really had since Jesse Bates left town a couple of years ago. So I'm confident that we're going to see a better version of Battle compared to what we saw in the preseason. But I think Turner is a similar case with Cam Taylor-Britt, where I think the ball skills aren't necessarily always there with Turner as opposed to Taylor-Britt, who's probably their best cornerback in terms of turning his head around, getting his hand on the ball. But again, I think he's very natural as a man-cover corner. I think he's made some strides in training camp as well. He had maybe the best practice that a Bengals cornerback has ever had in training camp way back in, I think early August, when he had 5 passes defense against Joe Burrow and man coverage. So I think, again, this scheme with Al Golden is going to be a real benefit to these cornerbacks that maybe weren't always properly utilized under Lou Anarumo's more zone off coverage scheme, if you will, and they're going to have guys following receivers around and everything like that. So Turner is going to get the nod as a starter, and I think there's more that he can show that he hasn't necessarily shown in his first 2 years.
Okay. Josh Newton, you think he has got the game to be a really good contributor? Because he seems to be at least on paper, it looks to me he's the most talented bench defensive back. And I don't know how much they're going to use, their secondary compared to Anarumo's scheme. Do you think we'll see more DBs in this one?
It's a good question. I think Newton had a chance to emerge as a starter, but then I also think that his best position is also as the nickelback, and with Dax Hill starting there, you want Dax obviously on the field, and I think it's fine that Newton is going to be your first cornerback off the bench. I don't think he has the long speed necessarily to last on the outside, but he's someone that the coaches completely rave about as a developing leader, someone who's always 110% in practice, and you want guys like that coming in off the bench for injuries because they're going to be ready to play. And I think he can overachieve in a more limited role. So I'm comfortable with where he is on the depth chart. Marco Wilson, I think, is kind of in a similar vein, more talented, better athlete. But again, probably you wouldn't want him any higher than the 5th cornerback coming off the bench. I honestly think that the best reserve in their secondary is Tyson Anderson, who is now that first safety off the bench. He's always been a baller in the preseason. He's a special teams savant, so he's obviously always going to be active. And with Geno Stone, he's kind of in a really crucial prove-it year as well, who didn't really have a great season last year. I think the leash on him should be rather short, and if he struggles, just these past couple years, Nick Scott struggled, so Jordan Battle saw the field. Von Bell struggled, so Jordan Battle saw the field. If Geno Stone struggles, or I guess if Jordan Battle struggles, Tyson Anderson's going to get that first shot, and he's just an elite athlete who I think is really fiending for a more expanded role on defense, especially in a contract year. So if he does see the field, I'm not going to be scared about him taking on a starting role if he needs to, because I think he's got more to show than he has shown.
Okay. Now we'll talk about the offense. And is there any reason to doubt that this offense isn't ready to break more records?
Honestly, man, the fact that they didn't have to sign Noah Fant in training camp, and they honestly should have signed Dalton Reisner a lot sooner, but the fact that both of those signings came into fruition, you're looking at an offense that, I'll be honest, doesn't really have any weak points right now. I think it makes sense why Lucas Patrick is starting at right guard, because he's been there the longest and he took the most starting reps with the team throughout the offseason and training camp and everything like that. But if he underwhelms and he's going to be under a lot of pressure in week one, then you have a guy in Reisner who is a proven starter in this league. And if he's the answer, then you really don't have any liabilities on this offense. And that wasn't always the case with this offensive line. I think Dylan Fairchild proved that he definitely belongs as a starter in the preseason. And again, I want to temper expectations a little bit because it is just preseason action, but I think he's already exceeded expectations. So your two biggest question marks for both guard spots. Everywhere else, like you said, proven commodities and proven contributors to one of the best offenses in the league. It was always just about, are there going to be turnstiles in the interior offensive line? If Ted Karras doesn't take, a step back now that he's, 32 years old, you have an offensive line that's just solid throughout, and you have the best skill position players in the NFL with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's really hard to see this offense being anything worse than top five, in all honesty.
And do you think it's a coincidence that there's some confidence about the line after they bring in Scott Peters? Do you think he's been a big part of this, or just kind of a coincidence?
I'm not going to say it's a coincidence outright. I don't know exactly how much of an influence that Peters' teachings have had on some of these guys. I would like to credit him, obviously, and I would still reserve judgment until we see this line in actual games. But I think the early parts of the tape, you've seen a more established pocket for Joe Burrow in the 5 series that he had. Like with Frank Pollock, he would kind of coach his guys to kind of give up some ground in order to kind of re-anchor. But Peters' coaching style, I think, has been more on the attacking side and getting in guys' faces and allowing Burrow room to step up and be Joe Burrow. And I think that's already been a difference that we've seen in some of the, again, very reserved tape. But Orlando Brown Jr., I think he made a lot of changes to his technique last year, and that's kind of carried over. Amarius Mims has kind of done the same thing this year. He just looks like a more calm and poised pass protector. And again, like the early signs of Dylan Fairchild coming from being a 2-year starter at Georgia who, I think could have been even better this year if he had returned to school. He looks like he belongs too. It doesn't look too fast for him. So all these guys, I think, are playing at the very least at the baseline of what their level should be. I think it was he probably gets a lot of credit, Peters does, for Jalen Rivers kind of stepping in at right guard for the very first time in his career and looking, he's just surviving, keeping his head above water. That's what you want from these rookie offensive linemen. So I will give credit to Scott Peters so far for the work that he's done in implementing these guys and making sure that they're playing at the very least at their baseline level.
Is there I would ask about the entire offense, but those would be too easy to answer. So for the offensive line, is there a player on the line that the Bengals can least afford to lose?
Probably one of the 2 tackles right now. It's a weird spot when the Bengals have actual interior offensive line depth, and that's just not the case at the tackle spot. Cody Ford is their lone backup tackle, and you definitely don't want him playing significant snaps. If he has to play 10, 15 snaps as in an emergency situation in a week, that's perfectly fine. I think he can manage that, but their 4th tackle on the roster is technically Jalen Rivers, and he looks to be a more natural player at the guard spot compared to surviving against speed on the outside. So right now, they only have 3 tackles on the roster. They have a handful. I think they have 2 on the practice squad, including Javon Foster, who was a 4th-round pick by the Jags a couple of years ago. But I think people within the Jags organization maybe view him more as a guard as well. So they have very minimal tackle depth, and obviously Amarius Mims has an injury history. Orlando Brown Jr. doesn't, but he did suffer an injury last year that took him out for almost half of the season. So that is an interesting position to watch as far as what can actually handicap this offense, because if they were to suffer an injury at guard, I don't hate Lucas Patrick coming off the bench if he were to be benched later in the season. I definitely don't hate Dalton Reisner coming off the bench or Jalen Rivers coming off the bench at guard.
Okay. What's up with 5 tight ends?
Is that the question? Yeah.
Yeah. What's up with that?
That's all you need to ask, I guess. Mike Gesicki is a tight end in name only. He's essentially their 3rd wide receiver. He's basically never going to be in a 3-point stance. So right there, that's 4 tight ends. And then Tanner Hudson is also kind of in a similar vein. I wouldn't exactly label him just a big receiver, but he is essentially Gesicki's backup. If something were to happen to Gesicki, you would give those snaps to Tanner Hudson immediately. Cam Graney and Drew Sample are your true inline Y traditional tight ends. And then Noah Fant is kind of like the hybrid of all of them. Like Eric All Jr., who is still hurt. He's going to be potentially back in 2026. That is who Noah Fant is essentially replacing on this team. He's going to be lined up as an inline guy. He's going to be lined up in the slot. He's going to be lined up in the backfield, taking on some screen passes, taking on some intermediary routes, taking on some blocking. So Noah Fant is like the bridge between this tight end room, which has some receiver onlys, some blockers only, So it's an interesting group of 5, but I would really only look at it as 4, with Gesicki being the tight end name only.
Okay, so a couple of questions regarding some of the bench skill position players. First of all, Jermaine Burton. So what's your feeling on whether or not you think he can actually make an impact this season?
He may not have to, because there's 3 capable guys in front of him, and I'm interested to see how much of the preseason hype of Mitchell Tinsley kind of carries over into the regular season if he gets an opportunity over Jermaine Burton. I think if Burton hadn't gotten injured later in training camp, and then I think he re-injured his knee in the preseason finale, there would be more of a sense of like assuredness with Burton this offseason. I think he was a lot more locked in, and I think he took the necessary mental steps to position himself to not only make the team, but to be a contributor. Okay. I think his best chance of contributing is going to be on special teams. He's the backup kick returner and punt returner to Charlie Jones, who, again, like Charlie Jones, has also taken a lot of strides this offseason because he's finally healthy, and that hasn't really been the case in his first 2 years. So their depth of receiver looks really promising. I think with Burton, it's just about, if he does get on the field, is it going to earn the trust of Joe Burrow? I don't think that is quite there yet, and I think Charlie Jones and Mitchell Tinsley both developed a lot more trust with Burrow just in the past handful of weeks, and it just sucks that Burton was hurt, because I think he was on his way to doing that, but the injury kind of prohibited from really getting to that level. So he's probably wide receiver 6 right now, and that's probably not going to change until something happens in terms of injuries.
All right. And Brooks, do you think that as early as this season, he could end up with the second most snaps in the backfield?
Absolutely. I think, Chase Brown, the whole goal with him was to build a run game around him, but to make sure that he's not getting the ball like 30 times a game like he was at the end of last season, because as exciting of a player that he is, you don't want to run him into the ground.
Yeah.
And if something were to happen to him, honestly, I think that Taj Brooks would get a fair shot at getting maybe the majority of snaps instead of maybe Samaje Perine. Maybe not initially. Like, they would obviously have more trust in Perine because they know him in the system, but if they were to be without Brown for an extended period of time, I think that's when Brooks would become more elevated in terms of importance, because he's just a better athlete. He's obviously got, less more tread on the tire being a younger player, but he brings a good combination of explosion and some power to his game. And the fact that he was such a quality pass protector coming out of college, he might have the trust to be a 3-down back if given the chance when depth is into question there. So by the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Brooks ends up with the second most snaps. I think they just trust Perine right now, and they know what he brings to the table. But I think running back is a position where, as the season goes on, you want better athletes to kind of just take over as the season goes on, and you need some more dynamicism in the backfield. That the run game has always kind of evolved for the Bengals as these seasons have progressed. I think it's in a better spot now to have some season-long sustainability. But Brooks, I do think that he's RB3 right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's RB2 by the time like week 13 comes around.
Did you notice anything? And because I know we talked about it when he was drafted, but just didn't really understand why he wasn't looked at a little, even more so as a, and I've seen some of these running backs get drafted ahead of him, 3rd round, 4th round and such. I was wondering, like, did you notice, like, was there something like a knock on him that you knew about that now that you've seen him that you just think, nah, that they were wrong on that scouting report?
I think, I mean, you follow this draft class really closely. It's a really deep one, right? And
that's true.
Naturally, like, some guys just get pushed down the board. That was kind of their whole rationale as to why he was there in the 6th round. The fact that he had, I think, nearly 900 total touches at Texas Tech, like the workload and everything like that in terms of long term. I think he also tested better at Texas Tech, or he tested better at the combine than probably how much he looked at just on film. So I think all those combined led to a guy that kind of just got lost in the radar. But we've seen, obviously, running backs from all over the draft, produce and develop into solid role players at the very least. And I think that's the case with Brooks as well, because when we've seen him in practice, again, there's a lot more burst than you would have expected. But with that burst comes a very hard runner who can bounce off defenders. And that's definitely valuable because it's not something that the Bengals have always had at that 3rd running back spot.
Okay. So injury-wise, let's see. No designated red colors, so that's good. The way we color players here on the depth chart to signify a banged up player. So you mentioned all. So is there a chance? I guess there is. He's on the pup. So do you think we'll see all? And if we do you think that he'll be able to contribute this season?
I think he's on the reserve pup, so I think he's out for the year.
Oh, he
And
is. Okay.
even if he did have eligibility, the whole thing was that he retore the same ACL that he tore in his last year in college at Iowa. So that happened last November, and then he had to have surgery on that. But then there was complications, so he had to have another surgery. So it's basically like just doubling the recovery time for a normal ACL. So it's basically just 2026 or bust for him.
And any of these injured reserve players designated to return? There's two of them.
Yes.
Either guy worth mentioning?
Yeah, so Dijon Anthony was supposed to make the team as the fourth safety. He got injured in the preseason finale, which is why PJ Jules is now the fourth safety. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't end up signing another veteran or someone to maybe boot Jules off the team and bring him back to the practice squad, but I think they clearly like Jules, at least for the time being, for these next 4 weeks, to be that fourth safety, play special teams. But I think once Dijon Anthony is healthy enough to return, I would expect that to happen unless Jules shows something on film in his limited role that they're like, okay, we want to keep Jules, and maybe we'll just stash Anthony on injury reserve for a little bit longer in case something does happen. Cedric Johnson, kind of the same thing. It's a kind of a deep defensive line room now. I don't know if they have room for 6 defensive ends. I think they really like Cam Sample, who's the 5th defensive end at the moment, and obviously the other 4 have a lot more job security. So it wouldn't shock me if both those guys ended up being healthy by the time like October rolled around, but maybe they weren't needed. But obviously, Greg, the Bengals are perfectly healthy right now in terms of their active roster, but that will not be the case in 4 weeks.
Yeah. You don't have to tell me about that. All right. Etienne, he was a guy that I liked. It's too bad that he's out. When did he get hurt?
He got hurt in the preseason finale as well.
Okay. So was he doing okay? Was there any chance that he could have made the team, or was he just a practice squad guy?
He wasn't going to make the team, but I think he definitely, like, his good plays were definitely flashed like, oh, there's definitely something there. I think there was just way more up and down that you would have wanted for someone who was going to be like a first tackle off the bench type player.
And as far as the practice squad, matter of fact, I'm only seeing, 3 CFAs here. Oh, CFA long snapper. Okay. Mm-hmm. And just 1 CFA on the 53-man outside of this. So 2 in general. Cross and Wagner. Not a lot of CFAs. You have a few here. So you surprised at all by that? I'm not sure how many they had going into camp. Is there or who would be the one? Well, the long snapper. I'm sure he's got the biggest job of them all. But any of the other CFAs worth noting?
Yeah, Howard Cross seemed like he had the inside track to be defensive tackle 5 really since I want to say the middle of training camp. I think the coaches really liked how he approached practice. I don't think he was particularly promising in the preseason games necessarily, but Notre Dame guy, Al Golden coached him for the last 3 years, so there was the connection there. Eric Gregory, another CFA from Arkansas, he made the initial 53, and then he was waived in order to fit Dalton Reisner on the team. They expected him to clear waivers and then bring it back to the practice squad, but then he got, I believe, claimed by the New England Patriots, which led to Mike Pennell being signed to the practice squad. And Mike Pennell is interesting. I know he's not a UFA, but he could be elevated to the active roster in these first few weeks to give him some true depth at nose tackle. But then the other CFAs like Seth McLaughlin, really high on him. They were really high on him in the building, and he just didn't really get healthy enough in time to really compete for the backup center job. So I think it's just going to be about developing him on the practice squad this year, maybe competing for a roster spot next year.
Okay. Let's pop in the win total for the Bengals this season. And we're sitting at 9.5, which, I mean, I jump all over that. I mean, there would have to be injuries on this team, in my mind, for them not to be able to win 10 games. I know it's a tough division. I get that. But they're predicted to be second in the division. Vegas has them second in the tough AFC North. But the over is only 9.5. That seems a little weird there. Do you think this is at least a 10-win team?
I have them at 10 right now, and I think I have them there because they did have a lot of bad luck last year with a lot of those close losses. They only really got lucky against Dallas because of some crazy special teams wackiness, and then the Denver game in Week 17 was a bit back and forth as well. But most of their close losses, they had some bad breaks go against them. Obviously, the defense was the main cause of that. Like, they just couldn't close games, and the offense, they would score 30, but when they needed to score like 45, right? So it's hard to blame them for not doing as much, but you expect the offense to if not replicate their success, at least be similar because all the guys are back. And again, like you said, injuries would be probably the main catalyst as to why they can't be as good. I don't think the defense is going to be as bad. How much better remains to be seen. So if you just take that simple formula, yeah, you would assume that 9 wins is probably the most realistic floor for this team. I just don't think that they're bad enough to completely bottom out. I don't think that they're good enough on paper to be the division winners. I think the Baltimore Ravens are just far and ahead, just the better team right now. They're obviously more proven. But yeah, like I think 10 wins is a pretty safe, not even an optimistic prediction. Like I feel like optimism would warrant like 12 wins or more. I think 10 is probably a realistic scenario for where this team is and where they're expected to be.
And how's the schedule? Of course, they open up with Cleveland, and they have Cleveland's number lately. So do you expect it would be disappointing if that game is it just a matter? I just win week one. It's week one, just because the Bengals, everybody knows by now that they get up to slow starts under Zach Taylor, which prompted the starters and Joe Burrow. We want to play early, and they get out there and play. So, hey, try something new, right? To see if you can get off to a better start.
That's certainly the plan. Like they've done pretty much everything differently. They altered training camp schedules. They play their starters in the preseason. There was more intensity. There was obviously a newer coaching staff on the side of the ball that was the weak spot last year. Like they made, I think, enough changes internally and like in terms of their process to, start the season better. But it's just it's again like I see better than I hear, right? So until I see them actually look like a competent team in week one, I'm expecting in Cleveland, and obviously division games are always tough and everything like that. I'm expecting probably a pretty ugly game because the Browns defense typically plays this offense pretty well. They're definitely more talented than people give them credit for because they're just the Browns, right? But Mason Graham is certainly a scary addition to the interior of that defensive line and against an unproven interior offensive line for the Bengals, on top of also having to block Myles Garrett. It's going to be tough for the offensive line to give Burrow enough time, and Denzel Ward always comes to play against Jamar Chase. So the Bengals offense, I do expect them to, flash in this game, but in terms of looking like a complete team week one, I'm not expecting that. So it really could go either way, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, nobody knows what to expect from Joe Flacco either. I mean, can Joe Flacco come back to being the guy that he was when he was here before? And if he is, then wait a second, maybe the Browns won't be as bad as everybody thinks, or is he going to be more the guy that we saw last year? So yeah, that's the thing. We don't know until the games begin. What do you think about the schedule? Does the schedule, did that change your mind at all? Or based on what you've seen already over the last few months regarding what you know now, or the schedule shouldn't really impact your prediction on where you see the Cincinnati Bengals go this year?
I think it's a pretty balanced schedule. I think weeks 3 through 7, there's like 5 playoff teams in there, I want to say. And, from the past years, I try not to weight how much, last year's success, factors into that. I'm trying to project how these teams are this year. But I think there's a handful of teams that are clearly better than the Bengals on this schedule as of right now. But for the most part, there are games where the Bengals should win pretty easily, and it's just a matter of stacking wins and not, obviously losing multiple games in a row. I think the end of the year, it was kind of in their favor, like those last 3 games as well. Playing at Baltimore on another Thursday night definitely doesn't help them. That game's on Thanksgiving, and I think playing the Patriots a handful of days before, we saw how that happened last year. It's kind of more of a trap game, if you will. So I don't think it's an easy schedule, and I don't think it's a hard schedule. I think that's also kind of weighted into how I don't think the Bengals are going to be spectacular. I also don't think they're going to be horrible. I think this all kind of averages out to a solid 10-win season.
Yeah, and taking a look at those games you mentioned, from 3 to 7, they really need to get off to a good start.
Yeah,
they really need to get off to a 2-0 start. And it would be disappointing if they didn't get off to a 2-0 start with the schedule anyway. I mean, say what you want about nobody knows until the season begins what a team like Cleveland or Jacksonville is going to do. But if you're going to be a playoff team, you got to start with 2-0 against the schedule. It's bottom line. So, all right. Is Zach Taylor, does he have anything to worry about if they don't make the playoffs?
If he doesn't make the playoffs, context will definitely matter. I've kind of been of the opinion that this is not an all or nothing year, and I was more confident saying that if Trey Hendrickson got more than just a pay raise this year. I think if you look at the roster, there are a lot of guys who you're not going to make decisions on this year. You're probably going to make decisions on them after 2026. So the team could look significantly different in 2027. Zach's contract expires at the end of 26. We know this team, they don't like to fire coaches when they still owe them money. So I would say that Zach is more likely safe this year, regardless of what happens. If they have another great year offensively and they don't make the playoffs, I think that enters an uncomfortable conversation. But if they make the playoffs in any way, shape, or form, even if they get embarrassed in the first round, I think Zach is safe. So I'm not going to say that this is like an all or nothing year like I think some of the media is projecting it, but I think that conversation really starts in 2026, which is unfortunate because you don't want to have any more wasted years with Joe Burrow. But I just think with the structure of what this roster is, the fact that Zach has 2 years left, I'm not ready to say that 2025 is like the all or nothing year.
And this is it for Hendrickson, right?
I don't know. I think his agent did a horrible job of not including the no tag clause, and I think the way that the Bengals structured that deal, like they added a void year, which basically means that they're paying him, I think, $30 million in cash this year, but they're only taking on $20 million in cap. So $10 million in cap is going on next year, but they're not paying him any cash. So they could tag him for like 30 something million, and they would only be paying him 30 something million while the cap number would be like 40. So they care obviously a lot more about cash than cap. They set it up where they can tag him next year, obviously piss him off exponentially more because why would you want the tag if you want a long-term extension? But like, that's just how they see it. Like, they don't want to commit to him for multiple years into the future. But if he does well again this year, which I have no reason to believe that he won't, I would honestly, at this point, expect him to get tagged, and that's going to be a whole nother controversy, but that's obviously a problem for 5 months into the future.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know that. Wow. That is surprising.
It sucks. I would rather, for Trey's sake, I would rather him just go off and get the contract that he wants, because it's just not going to happen here. And if he believes it's going to happen here, he's a fool.
Yeah. That what you just said there, that's proof. Yeah. If they would have at least did something with the tag, that'd be different. But wow. Okay. So anyway, every NFL team out there pretty much has their own problems. So health being paramount, and we'll see if the Bengals can stay healthy this year. And if they can, again, I think they're a playoff team for sure. Whether they could actually make a run, the reason I'm confident they can do that is just all, of course, because of Joe Burrow. And there just isn't enough quarterbacks, and that includes Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. There's just not enough quarterbacks that can go to the postseason and beat Patrick Mahomes. There just aren't. And Joe's one of them. So
many have come close. Only one of them has done it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Jalen Hurts has done it too. So, I mean, the Eagles are the Eagles.
Yeah, if you can worry about them into the that's an NFC team, so we don't really, but it just shows you. I mean, everybody's, of course, you got the Bills and the Ravens are the top 2 teams as far as the Super Bowl is concerned, but it's Joe Burrow. He's the one. And I would think if you're Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, you're not going to say it, but you just know it. They don't want to face him in the playoffs. They'd rather just bring back Josh Allen, bring back Lamar. We know we can beat them. We've beaten them before. It's a confidence thing. But that's why I think if they can just get into the playoffs, I think they could be real dangerous. So
I think a lot of Cincinnati would agree with you there.
Yeah. All right, John, I appreciate it as always. I look forward to hopefully getting the opportunity to talk to you during the season, if it's a really fun season as well. And we got links in the description where you can check out John and his work as far as anything you want, social media, website, A to Z Sports, and so forth. So, John, again, thanks for checking in with us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Greg.
You got it. All right, that's John Sheeran, A to Z Sports. That's going to wrap it up here for our show and our 32 of 32 teams. Thank goodness. The NFL season kicks off tomorrow night. And the next time I speak to any one of these great analysts, it'll be just to talk about, hey, what's going on this week? And I'm glad we'll be doing that. So thanks once again for tuning in here to the ProLine TV YouTube channel and the Our Lads Football Network. We'll see you next time. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and all that good stuff.